All right, let's start. If more people are trickling in, we'll just add them to the discussion. Once again, a wonderful evening. My name is Aaron Scheer. I will be the future CEO of NoTube. And with me is my mother, Marguerite Dunitz-Scheer, who is our medical lead at NoTube. And today the topic is ARFID. This is how we can help your child. The way in which we do these webinars is that you can raise your hand and ask a question. Some of you might have sent in some questions. If you would like that question to be asked, we still would ask you to raise your hand and just pose the question. And thirdly, if you wouldn't like to talk, then you can also just put a chat message in. But really, we're a group and an amount of people where we can just have a conversation in the group. And so please feel free to chime in. Once there's many questions, then it's my job a little bit to host the whole thing. Also, I want to inform you that the whole thing is being recorded. And after the seminar, you will get the webinar, the recording of that webinar. And that's about it. As far as the rules go, we have 1 hour together. And maybe, Mom, I'll give the word to you, and then we'll start with the first question.
Good evening, and thank you very much for joining in. At the moment, we are a nice group of about 10 people addressing a very, an issue which I think has become extremely main topic in the last few years for parents raising children and for any professional in contact with children, be this teachers, nursery people, nurses, pediatricians. The question how to feed one's child in a responsible and healthy way has become the most urging issue for some parents. They can hardly think of any other issue more important than this. So we are dealing with a topic with a lot of ideology combined in it. And as a pediatrician, we are, of course, on the one hand, confronted with the question, are we talking here of spoiled children and incapable parents, which we definitely don't think, or is this whole reaction can be seen as something like a modern choice of sensitive children to the abundance of food and the just nearly unbearable over quantity of food offered to them, and in their developmental age of becoming our own personality between 1 and 5, the question of what do I want and how do I want to tackle this issue becomes very prominent for the child. And then suddenly they kind of invent the power of choosing and the power of refusing. And so there's a lot of behavioral issues mixed into the sensory issues. And we're dealing here with a very, very diverse range of different ways in which children are highly selective or selective, in which way children express this, incapability of just eating what their parents serve them. And I'm very much looking forward to your questions. And maybe at the beginning of your question, you could just tell us whether you are asking your question from the perspective of an affected parent or from a more professional perspective. That might be nice. And we have the time to go into depth on these.
And to get to everyone, thank you. Who would like to start with the first question?
Emiliano, you are not muted, so good evening.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you? Fine, yeah.
Lovely, thank you.
I have a question. What's the news about the therapy ARFID with ARFID? Because if you remember, we have Samuele, that we were there in Graz into 2019. And he's almost 9.5 years. And he has ARFID, and it's 2 years that he attends an eating school in Prague. He's just the only one in Czech Republic, yeah? He's just the only one, and there's I think that something changed, but it's always difficult for us with Samuel, you know. And my question is, what's the news with ARFID therapy, you know, in your association? Because in 2019 we didn't speak about ARFID because it was you know it was early, and now I'm very interested to understand what changed in your association with this kind of therapy, you know.
Emiliano, that's a very good question, and we could really spend the whole hour talking about that. But I would like to compromise it to two topics. I think we have become much more differentiated and respectful of the enormous variety of different kinds of ARFID. And we see very big difference in the way smaller, younger children, say age 2, 3, 4, respond to our concept as older. Like we have to adapt to the age and the personality and the smartness and the specificity of each child. And I think the team definitely has become much, much more differentiated in looking at every child much more individually and not just saying this is the problem on the one hand. And I think we very much try to address two main targets. And the one is reducing the parental expectation and urge to get their child to do something. That's one aspect. So if I say it honestly, working with the parents and really working honestly with them in where does this pressure come from? What is your fear? What makes it such a central part in your life, whether your child eats broccoli or not, and things like that. And the second is the child itself. And I think this has become very apparent to me that you can't just mix it. And if you don't change the parents' perception of their part of the problem or their suffering of the problem, then the child will not be able to move. But if you only help the child and the parents are not able to reduce a part of the pressure and the mindset, the child cannot move. So I think we see very much, we're just now tonight in the middle of our eating school of February. We're just at the end of week 1. And it's quite amazing that when the parents start realizing, sharing, they're not alone with their problem. There are many, many parents from different countries coming together and they say, wow, you know, I can fully understand your concern and your suffering in a certain way. Already that changes the way their child feels, and their child will behave differently. And we have become much more conscious and strict about the protection of the children in their ability to learn in the group. So we are not telling parents, do this, this, this with your child, but we are saying, take a step back. Let's really look at what your child is actually, how he is behaving in the group, how this child fits to another child, you know, of maybe same age, how children can influence each other. And then suddenly children can do completely unexpected things. And the selectivity sometimes can change in amazingly short time if it is more behavioral, and if it's mainly sensory, we have to be patient, and take off pressure. So it's, Aaron, maybe you can.
Well, I think part of your question, Emiliano, was also what changed in the last 5 years. And I think really the title of ARFID and the popularity of that has been introduced. And I think it's both helpful and not so helpful because I think before we were just like kids with a tube and kids that don't have a tube and have other problems.
Yeah.
Now with ARFID, there is this new umbrella term over the second group. And I think what we have now developed further is that ARFID isn't one thing. Really, ARFID is much more individual than a tube because a tube has this physical part to it. And with ARFID, we see children that, for example, suffer from autism and therefore are hypersensitive and therefore have their issue. And we had one family in the summer where I feel like the main, and that would be the third target, Mom, that I would add to yours, is the relational target, where it was a mother that couldn't let go of her second child as far as her last child. And that was sort of the part that was holding back the child making the next steps toward autonomy. And I think where we're now is not to just say this is an ARFID or this is a picky eater, because the reasons why the child doesn't want to eat, not why it can't eat, are so wide. And so therefore, we really have to invest in this. What is the relation and what kind of often power struggle also is the child trying to address via the food? For example, if they can't talk yet, I think, and that's my perception of it, they know that over food they have such control over the parents and they really have a leverage of power in this discussion where they know that especially mothers are suffering tremendously. And so we have to look behind what is going on here relationally in the power dynamic. And then I think what has been also new is just that this term is new and is diagnostically maybe beneficial because you can now easier diagnose somebody with ARFID than you were able before. But as parents, it can also be difficult because it's avoidant restrictive intake food disorder, which is such a wide variety that would mean like if I have a cold and we say I have an infectious disease of the body, it wouldn't really point me to the next step. And so there we really tried to just look at the very individual and subjective situation.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Very welcome.
Thank you.
Any further question? Please, Astrid. Yes.
Hello, I'm a pediatrician in Vienna, and I just wanted to ask you, for example, if a child has autism, if you already know he has autism, for example, if it comes to your place, do you diagnose ARFID in addition? Or do we say, no, it's actually a problem of autism, and that is why I don't give the diagnosis in addition?
Well, my question as a pediatrician is first, will the child profit from an additional diagnosis? I don't really want to make a child more ill by giving an extra diagnosis. So if I can definitely see that the choice of foods the child eats and which it is living on is related to its autistic spectrum disorder, I wouldn't find it very helpful to add the diagnosis. If, on the other hand, I can help the child get more therapeutic support, if I write it by getting the insurance to pay a speech therapist or occupational therapist or whatever, join a program or visit our eating school, then I would say we have to discuss this with the parents. And we know hundreds of autistic children who are not specific in food. And in many cases, the autism spectrum disorder diagnosis, in my view, is wrong. It's given for a purely eating choice problem. So I think we have to be very careful, especially with young children. Before the age of 3, we don't really accept the diagnosis ASD, and there are very few good psychologists who do a reliable diagnosis on children below the age of 5. So I think we can't be careful enough about the question, who needs a diagnosis, and are we helping a child more than we are discriminating it? For me, the question is much, much, much more. Can I? That's lovely. You'll get a drink. The question is, how can we reduce stress? And this is for me much, much, much more important. These families are incredibly, incredibly, incredibly stressed. And not only the stress in the family, mothers cooking 4 different menus and things like that, but the comments made about these children, even in their own family, by grandparents, by friends, by neighbors, are so unhelpful and really not fair that I think this week we talked to very many of our families in the eating school right now about, what is really, what's the main suffering about. And we have now a little child where the kindergarten refused to take him. I mean, this is absolutely unacceptable. And in these cases, sometimes we have to get on the phone or write a letter, which clearly makes it clear that this is not the way to deal, because he's already 5, and telling him he's not allowed to go to kindergarten for the next year or 2, how will he ever go to school? Because his mom thinks he's going to starve to death if he spends more than 2 hours away from her. So I think your question is great, but yeah, the children don't need the diagnosis, but sometimes it's the gateway to receive more specific help, especially, for instance, in the national health system in Great Britain. The ASD label opens doors. And the parents sometimes say, please give it to us, because then we can get access to therapy.
I want to add something that also still contributes to Emiliano's question, and that is that if you take this example of Astrid, that a child has or has not, but might be on the autistic spectrum, then one doesn't, both have ARFID. We approach these 2 children very, very differently, because the picky eater who, let's say, has a spoiled relationship to his parents, and the autistic child that has a very hypersensitivity and very, very sensitive idea of what is safe and what isn't, they come from such different routes to the same, what you see as the same problem. But we don't treat them the same way, because with an autistic child, it's just not the same. And there we found that, for example, playfulness and really to push the idea of safety is much more giving great results. Whereas with another child, we really try to push the boundary of discomfort. So it really, on this like safety, we go in 2 separate ways, because if we were to push someone that is, let's just say for the sake of the example, very much on the autistic spectrum, and we say, hey, you can do this, just leave your comfort zone, this would not be a very good idea for these children. Yet for the 12-year-old girl who just wants to go sleep over at a friend's house, but is shy because she has these food habits, there we really try to push that discomfort zone. And what I wanted to add on your question, Astrid, is another question to you, Mom. Would you say you give the diagnosis for the parents or for the child? Let's say you have an 8-year-old where the child is also part of the interaction, and they know what's up, and they know there is a problem because they're in Graz in this distinct situation. Because I feel like often the parents want a diagnosis, whether or not, like, how do you deal with this sort of pressure from the parents? And how does it help the children versus how does it help the parents in your experience?
Well, I think the parents need a justification of having chosen this therapy. I mean, it's very unpolite and not effective to tell them your child doesn't have a problem. So taking their issue serious, whether you give it a name or a label or not, is one thing. But we have found that the age group 7 to 10 is specifically hypersensitive of getting a label. So we've had now in the last eating school an 8-year-old and now a 10-year-old girl who just stopped eating actually after COVID. The trigger was a COVID infection with loss of taste. and they started losing enormous amount of weight. And in these children who are very smart, they really suffer under the discrimination of being told that they are sick, because they're full of fears, and telling them that you have an illness. Both of them were weeks and weeks in a child psychiatry environment and got terribly worse because they suddenly didn't understand the world anymore. I only didn't feel like eating, and now I'm with children who want to kill themselves and all that. Our child psychiatric institutional world is not apt for children under 10. I'm very convinced about that. And giving them the feeling, you have a disorder, you have something which people call sick, is never helpful. So I would say towards the children, we work very much consciously undercover. We kind of neglect, we actually, the little girl now, she's 10, she found then in the game that she loved putting spray cream in her mouth with this, and she just finds it fun. And we have never talked about any word the whole week in the direction of symptom or suffering or sick. It's just, we want to help you get better again and increase your range of food and enjoy food and make it more normal. But we strictly avoid any kind of word which might make her more frightened again, because she's
or
already
self-conscious.
Yes,
I think that's
so frightened. That it's a lot about self-confidence. I can do this, and I'm not sick. I can do this.
And there we go again to the separation of the parent's path, if you want, because they want to know that they are not crazy. And they want to know that their child is not moody, but has an issue, and it's a medical one. However, the children are already self-conscious, especially on a social level. And so here in this question, for example, we have two different desires. The child wants to feel normal, and the parents, in a way, apart from the formal aspect, want to feel like there's something real here, because their immediate environment, say grandparents or something, come up with these very non-helpful, you just need to do this kind of advice, which again makes them feel more self-conscious. So we really have sort of like two different desires that come into this diagnostic conversation with our medical team. And what we are really careful of is, what does the child hear? And if the parents have a desire, then we address that one, but we don't make it the issue of the child.
And the child's not in the room. When we do
exactly.
history of how it all started, we always have the child play outside with another, sibling or a team member.
Exactly.
And not be part of a list of how things started. That's very harmful, really, for the child. And then the mom said, well, maybe it even started already in pregnancy because that and that happened. And, it's endless how these things are how one tries to get logic into a non-linear eating development.
Yeah. Any further questions? Please, Astrid, yes.
To know more.
Continue. No, go right ahead.
Have you got an explanation? I've got a little boy, for example, who went to kindergarten. His mother is very traumatized. That's an additional aspect. Then he goes to kindergarten, and there he started eating different things and started eating more than at home because he had a lot of bottles up till then. Have you got an explanation? Because in kindergarten, it's also very stressy actually for him, because there's a lot of new, a lot of kids, it's loud and whatever, and new structures. Have you got an explanation why he widens up more in the kindergarten than at home? I mean, what is a point, is that in kindergarten, it's nearly every day the same structure. That is quite good.
I'll start. We certainly don't have an explanation, but we do have hypotheses. I think my first one would be the social aspect of the other kids. In the kindergarten environment, there are kindergarten pediatricians and maybe a cook, and they have a job which is to put the food on the table, and now you have an hour to eat. We don't have this individual, I often call it the staring aspect of like, will it happen today? Think of any relational thing that you have even with your partners. Let's even bringing out the trash. The whole day is, will we have the conflict on the trash tonight or not? In the kindergarten, the child plays, the child is very stimulated with other stimuli, and I don't think he forgets that he has a food issue, but I do think it doesn't carry the same weight, nor it doesn't help him. Again, this is all assumption, but we don't know what the relational sort of dynamic is between the mother and the child at home. Certainly, whatever the child reaches by not eating in the kindergarten will not lead to those results. And then secondly, there's a bunch of kids around him which suggest through their behavior that now eating is normal and we eat what's here. So then you have another personal individual ostracizing fear of like, do I now want to be the ate potato child who is the special child, or do I maybe pretend to be okay here and at home I can be the special child again? So there's really a relational aspect with the other kids bring, and that's also what we do in our eating school. We try to put the ARFID kids and the pickies together, and not in a way of like, or you're the special kids, but rather create empathy for this guy likes the white bread and this girl likes the potato puree, and we're all just ourselves, and it's normal to have that. And so I think that would be my hypothesis. What would be your idea, Mom?
Well, I think the staring aspect and the expectation is really, one can hardly know how much the child suffers unknowingly under the mostly four eyes staring at, is it going to happen or not? What's going to happen? And how even we always have only one parent in the room with a child and not both. That already makes a difference. And then we make a Kindertisch, a children's table, and get the parents one line back so that the children are sitting with each other. And I think children are incredibly sensitive to expectation in the air. And if you run to the neighbor, many children are really quite tricky. They will eat more or less anything at the neighbor because she doesn't care and there's always good stuff there. And at home, it'll be a huge affair. And children feel a little bit, they don't understand why they're doing this because they're not doing it to be cruel. But there's something in their relationship with the control issue of their mostly mother, even greater than father, that makes them not be allowed to let it happen. And we have children who actually tell us, please don't tell my mom I can do this already. There's also this thing of shame, like they hide that they have, we make a little contest of tasting and having to raten, what is
having to guess new foods.
Yeah,
and there we'll have a
eyes.
situation where a child will want us to not tell the parents of the success of the day because they already understand. So there is their intricate understanding that if they know I eat tomatoes, now on the list of things they annoy me with, add the tomato. And so it's just not helpful for them. Even though they personally can make progress, which they also personally are proud of and happy with.
I think the role of the mother, I'm very, very sensitive about the whole topic of mother blaming. And I think it's a very neglected topic. Every pediatrician says things which kind of are meant helpful, but then stick on mothers, for years. And they said, he said this and this. But the role of the mother is incredibly strong in this whole discussion because they really are convinced that their child will not survive without their their special attention for the issue. And
Mhm.
with this, in this course, we had a mom with a 5-year-old. She said, as a present, like her symptom is, my child cannot eat without me. Punkt. That's the problem of, and now in the meantime, it turned out that the child had a fever seizure 3 years ago, and that traumatized her. She actually thought the child was dying. And since then, she knows the child can never be out of her sight. She has to be there. And today she told us that she, 1.5-year-old, choked twice. And she said her mother told her that all her childhood, I thought you nearly died. I put your feet in the air and the piece fell out. So this is even a transgenerational trauma. And it is really impressive how these traumata can affect small children and their life. And that's only one aspect in this whole discussion. I'm not saying that they all have a trauma, but we are dealing with selectivity with very, very diverse backgrounds. And that makes it also fascinating. And the wonderful thing is that if you are able to de-stress the parents a little bit, somehow the children really react with relief. And the parents then suddenly say, wow, that he never did. And then we kind of change the whole circle of interaction. And then the pathway opens. But I think it's about getting the child out of this, they want me to, or in my written, in the online counseling, we always get this sentence, how can I get my child to? Now, this whole idea is already, you're on the wrong path, because any wish to get your child with a smart kid will lead to refusal, and then it'll not work. But maybe we have other problems. Frau
Yes.
Thalhammer. Yeah,
Yes,
Alfiero.
Alfiero, I want to just 1 second and welcome. We have a couple new participants in our call. If you want to share your camera with us, open it, that'd be very appreciated. And also you can just like raise your hand, either visually like Alfiero just did, or also with the little symbol to share your question with us. Please, Alfiero.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for organizing this this webinar. So we're based in Sweden. We live in Sweden. We have twin girls who are about 2.5 years old. They were born premature in week 31. One of them, Esther, was very small at birth, 800 grams, and she was tube fed she was born in September 2022, and we took away the tube in like February 23. And then we tried all these ways that you have explained, 4 or 5 different meals, all kind of things, snacks and whatnot. And it's been a struggle basically ever since they were born. She's dependent off the bottle, basically drinking nutrition drinks. And this lasted for the entire the time of 2023. And last year, we were faced with the doctors telling us that she needs to do something, like we need to do something to improve this because she's not growing, basically. And we had this situation that you mentioned about kindergarten that were kind of not refusing us, but encouraging us to come back later because she was simply too small, it turned out that later during the year 2024, we found out that she had like a problem with her ductus, I think it's called, like, when there's like kind of a hole in the heart. And that her intestines were kind of placed in the wrong position. So she had these two things because she was vomiting a lot, basically every single day. So we fixed the heart and the intestine within the time of 4 weeks. She did these 2 surgeries. And then with the second surgery, they also gave her this button, like the PEG button, I think it's called. And we've been trying to feed her with this button since November last year, and she's been growing like at a faster pace, but not like huge improvements, like slightly better. The thing is that we don't really see this as a long-term solution. Like we realize this is not it's not working for us. Like she doesn't really notice because we feed her once she falls asleep. And we have a machine that is pumping this thing, and we're looking into your eating school. And my question is more of like a practical question, like how would you treat children that have this button in relation to your eating school? What are your experiences, basically?
Well, it's an excellent question. We actually nearly in every eating school have 50-50% of children. Right now we have exactly 4 children with a tube, 4 children without. In the question of your Esther, the question would be the timing. What is the best timing? And we would encourage you and recommend to wait until she has like a safe weight. About a third of all exclusively tube-fed children join the eating school and are underweight, even though exclusively tube-fed. There you shouldn't wait because it's just not getting better. But if a child has increased the rate of growth with the help of the PEG, you might ask the people who are in charge whether they recommend to still wait 1 or 2 months or maybe till the early summer or something. And then we have to first do a tube weaning and catch up with the eating. And of course, a child which has a better physical general state, the parents will be more relaxed to let it enter the world of foods. We had now a little girl from Holland. She's 3. And she just, at the end of week 1, she's eating like a child who actually never had a tube before. But until Wednesday, she was fully tube fed. That in her case, it was like the perfect moment to do this step. Before there were medical reasons why it couldn't be done. So I think ask the medical team of Esther what weight goal they would like her to reach. But it should be, well, between 2 and 4 months, maybe. Another. And then they get the tube weaning program, which basically meets the child at very different stages of its development, because some children will start and become bottle children after the tube is away. Some children will become puree and pudding children, and some, just like this little girl from Holland, just started to eat everything. She's eating solids. She's using cutlery. She blew us off in 3 days. So the rate of catch up in eating development is individually very different, but having a twin sister is a wonderful, mostly co-therapist. Mostly the twins.
If may I just comment, like, because it's also related to what you mentioned about this staring situation, which I think we try to avoid it, but it's very helpful to hear you explain this, because you get reminded about stop staring. Her twin sister has basically no problems. She eats very well, and we try to eat together all the time to also make Esther feel like you're not special in this way. You eat with us. In your experience, does this twin effect, or like the twin sister, is there any way we can like encourage Esther to look up to Hilma without thinking, I should become like her? Because we know you shouldn't compare twins in that way, oh, you're not as big as her, or you don't eat as her, because you're individuals. But since there is this thing that maybe, she's looking at her eat, and her sister she eats very well. Do you have any recommendations?
Yes, I can answer that right away, because the seductive quality is that you want to maybe instrumentalize Helma to help your mission of helping Esther. The thing is that Helma is probably already, and I'm not saying this in a mean way, but doing a much better job than you are. Because she's a child herself, and she sort of goes about it naturally. What we do in the eating school with siblings is first we look at what the relationship is, and then what we do use is the fact that siblings often feel very safe with their siblings. So when we go in a group, in some type of play group, then we say, hey, maybe no parents, just the twin sister, and then they can be friends. But we would never, this is one of the major rules, because at least one of the therapists of the team, every eating school, asked the question that you just asked: can't we just tell the older sibling to tell her this? And that is one of the very strictest rules of my mother. don't make a sibling a therapist. They're a sibling and they do a wonderful job at that. And then coming back to Esther, I think the way I understood your description is she never really faced hunger.
Yeah, but yeah, she hasn't really.
Right.
I mean,
And
yeah.
so that is why also this safe weight is so important, because what we do once it is safe, once the tube is not necessary, we need to wait a couple days till this child experiences and familiarizes herself, A, with the feeling of hunger, and secondly, that there is a connection between me eating and this feeling going away. And this for us is, of course, quite natural, but that's where I would say also when you don't want to make her feel special, I think what we can't be sure to know is that in Esther's mind, the three of you have an issue in your tummy that you're addressing on the dinner table.
Yeah.
Because she had never had to face this issue. And therefore, before we go down with the amount of food that she gets intake, the reason we do that is for them to get familiar with the feeling of hunger, because without hunger, nobody of us would ever be motivated to eat. And so those are then the steps where we also say, always the next step. And the next step for Esther would be, hey, what is hunger? How does that feel? And also, how do you deal with that? And then we see certain children who are like, this is nothing, I've experienced so much worse. And other children who are like, ooh, if I take a chocolate, this is becoming this. But as Helma, in my view, we would protect from being
The
put as an
therapist. Yeah.
agent. Yes. What would you, Mama, add to this?
I would just add that I think the idea of a eating school is very hard to explain. But since I grew up in Switzerland and Austria, I was confronted with ski class, children learning to ski. And in Switzerland, kids are 2.5 and 3.5 when you put them on the skis. And it does need the group. I have really learned also in my psychotherapy education that the power of a children's group, no therapist can reach. No, the best creative therapist can't be the same as a fun picnic group. And that's what the eating school offers. We have 2 little tables with 6, 8 little kids just having a joyful time with each other. And that's what I think is really the potential and the difference between the online weaning, because the very sick children who can't travel, some can't come to the eating school, but your little girls are, I'm sure in it, they would very much profit. And you're very welcome to look at our videos and maybe go through the assessment, and then we'll go specifically and give you also a recommendation about the ideal time to do it. But I would say don't wait too long anymore.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Last little addition, I just was thinking the only way we maybe sometimes use the sibling child is to tell the parents to back off. because they have much a better antenna of now the parents are in a mood, let's just say, than we do. And so sometimes we allow them sort of maybe to tell us or say, when mom does this, go in the other room with mom. Never the child, but also that one only if it's a fun day. I want to highlight quickly the time. We have 15 minutes left and therefore maybe move to the next question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe while you're thinking of a question, I just quickly want to highlight that, Melanie, maybe you're so nice to post it now, so it's not in the last 2 minutes. We brought with us today links to either do a little self-test and also just to straight up book a free evaluation. And why I say that now, because Alfiero, in your regard, maybe just the process to come to eating school in 3 words. You have a free evaluation. There it's just sort of what program would be the right one. Then second, you have an assessment, a medical one, where we need all your medical information to then really be sure that this child is qualified for eating school. And with that, we mean does not, for example, have a breathing apparatus actively or something like that. And then after this medical assessment, it's the question when the program, which was chosen in cooperation of the medical team and the parents, will start. You have the link now in the chat, and maybe we have another question in the room.
Can I? I don't know if it's.
One second, Emiliano. One
Yeah.
second.
Okay.
Katrin had one, and then we'll come to your question. We have easy time for
Yeah,
both.
yeah.
Katrin, please continue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I want to say hi. Can I speak in German? I'm
Yes,
not
and
so
I
good
translate
in
for the
English.
group. No problem at
Okay,
all.
thank
Yes.
you. Thanks. Ich habe einen Sohn, der ist 2,5 Jahre alt und ihm fehlen mehrere Gene. Und er entwickelt sich sehr gut. Wir haben eine Entwicklungsverzögerung, auch sprachliche Entwicklungsverzögerung. Und wir haben große Probleme beim Essen. Also er isst Brei, stückeligen Brei, aber sehr wenig normales Essen. Also wir müssen alles pürieren.
Just
und
a
so weiter.
moment.
Ja.
Aaron or Kath, shall I
I'll
translate?
go ahead. Katrin has a 2.5-year-old child who is missing certain genes, and therefore he has delayed development. And in this delayed development, currently he's eating only pureed foods and nothing with bits. Also nichts mit Stückern drin, gell?
Doch, schon.
Also bits. Okay, yeah, please continue.
Ja, okay. Und ich dachte eigentlich immer, ja, Ihr Verein oder Ihre Firma ist für uns nicht so geeignet, weil er hatte nie eine Sonde. Und ich glaube aber doch, dass es vielleicht nicht so schlecht wäre, weil wir selber schwer weiterkommen. Also wir müssen ihn manchmal auch zwingen, Dinge zu probieren, so wie Pudding zum Beispiel. Und dann schmeckt es ihm auf einmal so gut, dass er den ganzen Pudding wegputzt. Und er hat einfach kein Interesse oder keine Neugier, das Essen zu erkunden.
Ja, keine eigene Neugier sozusagen.
Genau. Die hat er nie
I'll
entwickelt.
translate for a second, Katrin. The child eats purees and also brei, and then sometimes when the parents introduce a new food and get lucky, bisschen Glück hat man da oder nicht, then he's really a fan of it. But the question is, he never seeks out or explores new foods on his own. And Katrin had the impression that we're only a tube company, a company that is about tube children. And now she's thinking maybe we are also coming question for this specific question. Katrin, ich formuliere die Frage jetzt einmal so, dass when my child has a delayed development, is it also something that we address in our programs?
Yeah.
Wäre das so ungefähr das? Perfekt.
Danke.
Yes, well, the answer is yes.
Okay.
Actually, we have a huge percentage of our children are former premature and premature born and chromosomal aberrations or anomalies. This is a very common thing in our population, and I would say probably half of all our little children without tubes have a quite significant eating development delay. This is something very common. And as Aaron said before, and this is kind of our motto, help make the next step. And that means see why he is stuck where he is. Are the parents like pushing too hard, or has the child actually got oral motor deficiency or sensory, which makes, for instance, chewing or swallowing pieces or tongue transport. Eating is quite a complex thing if you start thinking about eating and all these things. So I would definitely say for sure yes. And this is something which in the free evaluation can be discussed, but as soon as we get the 3 videos of the assessment, then we can really see what you mean and make a plan of how we can help him.
Ja. Toll. Also unser Sohn hat nämlich auch einen sehr schwachen Muskeltonus. Wir sind dabei, daran zu arbeiten mit Rotatherapie.
Can he sit? Can he sit
Ja.
upright? Super.
Ja.
That's
Ja,
wonderful.
er kann schon gehen.
I'll just step in with some translation. He also has a muscle tonus. And Katrin, what I want to add to your answer. Erste Frage, hast du die Antwort gut verstanden?
Ja,
Englischmäßig. Super. Dann
ja.
add one thing, and this is when you said delayed development. From a parental perspective, you then come into a comparative view. You have normal development, healthy development, but then delayed development really just means not normal. And so what we really we sometimes have a little detective work to do in eating school, which is what is the time of the child? So every child has their own time to move on to the next phase. And certain children, especially children which have these medical anomalies, they have a time that we simply can't understand quite. What I mean with that is for certain children with specific syndromes, when they reach the 6 to 7 year threshold, in their development, they will do the 2 to 3 threshold. And so this translation of really what is subjective time and when is it the right time for the child to move into the next phase often gets into conflict with what the parents wish. And then the parents think, oh, we've been so patient, but couldn't he now finally sort of get back on that track? And the answer is no, your patience will never be able to end. There is really, it's this empathetic thing of understanding where the child is. And then this is what we mean with child-led therapy. We listen to what the child's next step is, and we understand the parent's desire to move on. However, it's just not as central to the therapy as what the child tells us he or she is ready to move on. Thank you very much for this question. Emiliano, you will have the last question of the evening.
Which period do you think that it will be better to move in Graz for to get the therapy? Because during the school period, Samuel is very stressed. There's a lot of missing day that is unfortunately he cannot go to the school because he have a problem with stomach ache. He's very stressed, and I think that maybe during the summertime, maybe it could be better, but I don't know. I don't know if this is a good question or not.
Emiliano,
it's a
we
great
have
question.
one eating school starting mid-June, and the other one, I think, the second week of July. And we would very much like to welcome. Does he have already holiday in July?
Yeah, the school here is finished at the end of June. Doesn't mean that July and August is a holiday.
Well, then you're very, very welcome to join into the July school, which is mostly the only eating school where we have more older children. And you said your son is now 9. Is that
9.5? In May he will have 10 years.
So the July and August, but mainly the July is the peak of the bigger children, and he would fit in most probably very well.
Yeah.
And you're more than welcome to.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Because we are thinking about planning is.
Plan. Well, Prague is not so. The Czech Republic is very close to Austria.
Yeah, very close.
Yeah.
Also, Emiliano, I want to just subtract your question a little bit to make it also worth for everybody. And that's this question, when is the right time? A lot of parents ask us. It's rather a difficult question because with Alfiero, we talked about safe weight to bring. Then we have other kids who are still in the process of having surgeries and stuff like that. And then we say it should be healed properly on multiple levels, not just like fresh from the hospital. Then you have kids, for example, that have a big surgery coming up. Then we would rather not want to see them just before the surgery because then it can be altered again, the progress. And lastly, there is one rule, which is let's not wait if we don't need to. And then it becomes very tricky with Samuele, as far as I understand his situation correctly, is because who is to say how important, how now it needs to be, how the urgency is. And this is where we really have a lot of conversations with the parents, because the parents are also, and I'm not talking about your child now, but the parents are also afraid of the change, and they want to make sure that this will be the investment to fix the whole thing. And with that kind of mindset, you want to wait too, like let's be already 80% there, and then they make the last 20%. And there, what we really recommend is just to see how much does it fit in the life right now, and how much can the family come and have a comfortable experience. We've had families coming where, for example, one of the parents had to work the whole week and they had to switch out, and it's a rather stressful situation that might not be the best moment for the child. However, we on purpose don't just offer eating schools in summer and winter time, because certain parents also just like as soon as possible is often the case. Why? Because as every behavioral habitus that we develop, so every new, I think it's quite similar than addictions. If I really get honed in on one type of behavior that is helpful, then the longer I do this one type of behavior, the long it's going to stabilize. And so sometimes we have our youngest patients are 3 months old, because even though they show already this constant behavior of just a certain type of food intake behavior, they're not quite as used to it yet. But then again, with Samuele, he's 9 years old. He has a long story with this. So in your case, I would never say like next month is the most important month, but rather how well does it fit into Samuele's life? And
the
also,
whole
will it be
family.
an irritation for him? And if he wants to not miss school, and then his friends will ask where you at, and sort of those all things are relevant too. So in that question, I would say the summer is best. When I look back at Esther and Alfiero's situation, then I would say probably as soon as she's ready for this type of developmental change.
If I understood well, because in this year, in the last year, I get some readings about the ARFID, and what I don't know if I understood well or not. There's no ultimate solution for the ARFID.
There's a concept. We have developed a good concept now.
Yeah.
It's about a 30-page document. So for the team, the question of what do we do here, or what's the line of our NoTube team in ARFID has very, very much matured and developed in the last years. And it's much more structured now, and it's more concrete.
Mom, I think the question was, if you have a broken leg, there's a solution. And yes, Emiliano, as far as I understand, and I would love also to hear your opinion on that, Mom, ARFID is not like a broken leg. You don't have it and then you don't. Why I think that is because me as a well-nourished, healthy adult, I have days where I'm feeling bad and all I want to eat is butter toast. I have certain foods that I don't want to eat, and I have foods that I had 5 years ago that I do want to eat. So what I think sometimes is everyone has naturally a little bit of a pickiness, not ARFID, not picky eater syndrome, but every person has that. And so the question, Mom, and this is going to be our last question of the day, is when you once had a picky eater syndrome, or ARFID, can you ever completely not have it in your experience?
Okay.
Mama, what's your answer? Yes, please.
My answer is that you're going to keep your selectivity, but hopefully you will not suffer from it. So
that's it.
59.
And that means if you are widening your food intake from 3 foods to 25 foods, you will suffer considerably less. And if we look at just our, again, adult friend circle, I'm sure we all know an adult person who doesn't eat more than 30 foods. And now, were they or are they a picky eater? Doesn't matter so much, because they're not suffering and their environment isn't suffering either. With these lovely last words, not suffering anymore, I thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you.
You have the links in our website. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye-bye.